we'll get started. We're just missing Nancy at this point.
No, no.
Oops.
I just hi.
No, it's the huge thing now. Yeah,
Okay, that's good. We're all here. It's Wednesday, January 24th.
Sure, and then 2 slots for the share.
We have minutes of January 10th that were distributed electronically. Any corrections to the minutes?
Yes. One thing I want to mention, and it's not a big deal
And
to,
this is January 10th?
yes, just my name, Katey, and then you have me at school committee, and I didn't know if it could be school committee representative, because I feel like it could be misleading if somebody was reading it. But then the section that discusses Kay Adams questioning the employee section, I don't think it represents what I was saying. I was saying that I would like us to be consistent, and if we are reaching out to employees, would we consider reaching out to other employees? And I feel like that's really misrepresented in how that looks there. And oddly, it's one of the only places where it goes into great detail in these minutes. And so I would like some of that striked or changed.
And that's pretty much verbatim of what was actually said, but I can certainly change it.
If you could, let's hold off approving these. If you can come up with some recommended change language and email it around to Michael, and then we can do the change.
I have one change as well. I'm noted as both present and absent. I was indeed late.
Am I the same? I haven't found them yet.
No, you're good.
So you were initially absent, then you were...
So that's tardy.
Started, yes.
Good job.
It is a cool word.
I hope that's from the school.
From the school.
Literally. Any other changes? Corrections? Okay.
I'm sorry, I do have one.
Okay.
I didn't note that the charter spells out very detailed information related to the duties of the finance committee, but the finance department.
Got it.
Oh, one other edit. I think in the beginning it said...
Give me 1 second, please.
What?
Let me just catch up.
He's doing it real time.
He is, yes.
Getting to where you are. You said finance department.
Right.
And you delete members?
Delete members. Yeah, you can delete members. It was basically finance department.
Okay. And what was that, Ms. Adams?
Under call to order, it says sewer commission, and he was from the cemetery commission, our guest.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
They're in the rivers and museum.
Elsewhere it says cemetery.
Yeah, it says cemetery in the body, right? I missed it.
And you did, Mr. Uso did correct that.
The second one.
I guess I'll have to mention that I'm also present and absent at the same time. And I was absent.
This is good.
I didn't think it was a big deal. But
Yeah.
I figured you were just listing everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely a cut and paste, and then I started deleting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and you got Bob too.
I was absent.
Yes, we got.
He's also present.
Oh, so I shouldn't be present.
Oh,
I didn't catch that part.
this is a bad example of me.
This is late in the process.
And actually, we're not meeting in the Marion Benson meeting room. We're meeting the lower level because that's upstairs.
Okay.
Other than that,
This was a tough meeting.
well, you got to get it correct because once it's in there forever.
Got it.
Well, see, the problem was we expected to not meet.
Right.
We expected to be leaving.
Okay, so Terry sent around a proposed town survey for the first pass, sample survey question. Did everyone get a chance to review that?
Yes. I had just a couple of comments, maybe a question. I think the survey is a good idea. Your recommendation that we use Facebook for it, does that in any way limit who has access to the survey?
No, because it can also be in paper format. I think all I was suggesting was if My view on how I would do this would be, given the number of things that we're discussing and questioning, rather than have like one big survey, monkey survey, just put out a couple of questions at a time.
I like
week to
that
week.
idea. I think that's good.
But we were also talking about having paper copies available, whether it's at the library or the Eagle House or something that could be collected and turned in.
Is there
Or put it
any
in the
other
ledger.
electronic means?
I don't know, send email to everybody?
Well, part of the thing would be is SurveyMonkey is available. So we can do SurveyMonkey, and you give people the link to that. So on the town website,
Yeah.
and we can leave it other places and in the paper. So that way, you get the people who are on Facebook who can share it with other people, the town website where everyone has access to it, and then the paper copies we can put around for people who don't have electronic access.
Right. And then I was just thinking that basically just like once a week, that we just put out a next set of questions. So the next set of questions could include, do you care if it's a board of selectmen or a select board? Or something. Again, just with a little bit of an explanation of what the question's about, and here are some options to look at, just so that people know what we're discussing. That was all that was. So
Yeah. I think I like what went on this one. This is pretty non-controversial. It really captured our debate back and forth and what we wanted to try to get the feedback. For other sections, we probably want to review the questions and the recommended thing ahead of time, just so that we all agree that that's a non-directive type thing, which this is really non-directive.
Should we have a cutoff date listed on the form?
Please respond by.
That we did, and then the next question can go on, so that you don't have two surveys going on at the same time? Or do you want two surveys going on?
You may, because by the time you get things out with paper and other things like that,
Okay.
you probably, although if we keep doing this...
Well, I think we just have to have a cutoff date for when we want to vote. And I think that basically we're just saying that, whenever those results are in, we would like to have them before we vote. So if we anticipate voting on our positions on those first couple of items, say in 2 weeks, then yeah, we put it out this week, get it back for the next meeting, so we have that to inform the discussion. That's all. And it was basically just because that was what I was thinking, that it would have been nice if we had been doing. Just pick a section, so refer people to where they can find the charter to look at all, and then here are the things we're discussing within that section. Does anybody have any feelings about that? Yeah.
I support that.
Let's try it, see how it works. So, why don't you work with Heather to post to the town website, and you have know how to do SurveyMonkey?
Yes, I work with Steve.
Okay. And then I'll send you I didn't send it to you.
Okay.
It's really
Forward it
quick.
on.
It's really quick. And again, if anybody has any other changes that they want to make on it before it's published, then I won't take offense.
And what my goal is for our next meeting, in advance of the next meeting, I'm going to take the current town charter and put in it all the different topics that we've talked about changing. And I will come up with two different colors. One, the ones that are non-substantive changes that it seems like we've talked about doing, so that we can possibly take a vote on the non-substantive changes ones, and then come up with the other ones and possibly do an initial straw vote on some of those for the ones that we're ready to actually vote. There are times we want to get feedback from the public, and others it's like, let's just come up with what it is and then say. There'll be times when we'll actually say to the public, here's what we think would be the right thing, we'd like your input on that part. As opposed to, we don't have a position, we want your input. So there's a couple ways we can ask questions. So if there's anything that you're recommending for changes, that you want to get in on the agenda for future discussion, send them to me so that I can put those on as a separate agenda items for some of the sections that we've already talked about. So the theory is we've already talked about some, but if there's something that we haven't and we need to go back to discuss, let's come up with those. Okay, so our basic discussion tonight will be meeting with the town manager to talk about various topics on the charter. Heather?
All right, thank you for inviting me tonight. And so I put together a red line version, and it just basically was, my approach to it was comments, questions, and suggestions for changes in the current version of the charter. And it was identification of certain sections I thought needed further clarification or would create greater centralization in terms of the organizational structure, or create more practical approaches to the processes. So want to go to, want to go by section, by my comments?
May I just ask for the correct spelling of the last name?
L-E-M-I-E-U-S.
Sure, section by section.
Okay. So section 2-3, committees, under number 2. It talks about the town manager preparing the budget, and to me it was not clear at what point the town manager files the budget with the town clerk. At what point in the budget process?
Do you have a recommended time when you think it should be filed?
I think it should be filed at the end of the process. That would be the final version.
Right, and that's usually what
And
happens.
include, have the endorsement of the finance committee's final recommendations as well.
Yeah, that does make sense, because that's when it happens.
Section 2-7 for initiation of warrant articles. And this was just to create more practical approach, is that it, instead of being mailed to the residents to the chairperson of the finance committee, that a written copy be provided. And that can be, could be email. We use email on a regular basis usually for everything now, so. And a mail
Or a
version.
handout.
Right,
Yeah.
at a meeting.
Yeah. That was something we touched on when we took a quick look at it.
Same section under C, town agencies is referenced throughout. To me, it needs a definition attached to town agencies within the charter.
In my assumption, it should be departments and commissions, probably.
Is there a definition section that talks to you?
I don't think they had that.
No? Okay.
There is no definition section?
I don't believe so.
There's a definition section, but it's town agencies. Oh, sorry, it's a multiple member community, any department, division, or office, but I think that's kind of broad as well. So, is, say, housing authority. Next section.
So if there is a definition.
There's a section for definitions.
Yeah,
There
what's
is
that?
not one that says agency.
Yeah, there is.
Al?
Which says,
A town agency.
any multiple member body, any department, division, or office of the town commander.
So we should be consistent and call it town agency. So that we're consistent with what's in the definition,
It says that.
Yeah,
What does say town
Yeah,
agency?
teenage town.
in the definition.
Yes, so this would be okay then, because this is the plural of that definition then.
Oh, yeah.
And is that what we want it to mean? Is that how
Yeah,
you
that's,
were going to say?
yeah, basically was anything.
Is 3-2 under appointments. And this was in reference to creating more centralized organizational structure. It would make more sense to include the appointment of the finance director, the town treasurer, town collector, and council on aging director as appointments that are ratified by the board of selectmen.
And those positions are currently
The finance director, because there's two positions in the chart, the finance director and the accountant. The accountant is appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Finance director is appointed by the town manager. But right now, it's one individual.
But the change is, but the finance director, town treasurer, tax collector, and council and agent director, who appoints those now?
The town treasurer and town collector is the selectman.
Okay, all right, so it's moving over to the town manager. Your proposal, move those over to the town manager with the
Ratification, but to be consistent with the other department heads.
I think we discussed that.
We were talking about, what we wanted to know what department heads made sense to be
sense.
moving to this position. Are there any other department heads or positions that should be appointed by you in the same format?
That same reference with the council on aging director as well.
Okay.
And how about the town accountant? Do we want to mention it any place in case it becomes a separate?
So, well, the town accountant, the theory of that being appointed by the selectmen is you want to have a separation of duties. So you have the finance director component by the town manager and the town accountant by the selectmen.
If the town manager is the finance director.
Right.
But right now, it's the chief financial officer and accountant is the same person.
Correct.
Right, so that's what makes that, so who appoints that position?
Technically, no. The finance director and the accountant are the same person. The chief financial officer sits with the town manager. That's part
So
of it,
you are,
right?
so,
Although I think there's a,
There may be a change later.
yeah, there's
Okay, okay,
no, I
okay.
think there's a contradiction in here.
Okay,
about
that's why we're going
Okay.
to
The chief financial officer.
All right, so,
And who currently appoints these people?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay. Maybe I missed that then.
the Board of Selectmen currently appoints the people who she was just talking about. Warrant is 3-6, Board of Health, and just a comment that there's no section on appointments under Board of Health like there are for other elected boards.
meaning appointments.
There's no reference to,
Isn't that a general section on appointments for any elected positions? I thought that was general to cover all
Vacancy appointments?
vacancy appointments, yeah.
under Board of Health. I think they, under statute, have the appointing authority, so it would be covered under the last sentence, but I'm just for,
Are you talking about appointing Board of Health members or something below?
no, below. So if there was a Board of Health agent per se, or right now they're dealing with the regional, in Neshoba Valley.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
that's different.
no, that's different. I thought you were talking about
Yeah.
vacancies.
Okay, good catch.
3-10 for the planning board. There's reference to the planning director, which is now the land use director.
Okay.
And that position, this is where the appointment may become sticky, is that the director not only works with the planning board, but also works with the building department, the ZBA, and conservation.
So we need to, which would not be appropriate on,
Not be appropriate for just the planning board to
yeah.
make that
Yeah,
appointment.
but if it's appointed by the town manager, it's okay, right?
But we-
But with the ratification of the
3-7.
planning board.
They can file an intervention, but nobody else.
So we need to add some language elsewhere as far as supervision of those other departments.
Right.
Okay?
4-2, powers and duties, town manager.
There was some on 3.11, section C.
Actually, there are some pages missing.
Yeah,
3.7 to 3.11.
Oh, they're messing in mine too. Sorry about
I
that.
think it appears that the printout only includes those significant changes.
It is only those here.
So we
So did
skipped
you
over
see
from
something?
seven.
Thank you, thank you.
It's just
Okay.
a number.
Okay, good, thank you.
Did I miss something?
So which section is this page?
So
Collector.
that we're on,
Yeah, the town collector.
4-2, town collector.
4-2?
This refers back to my previous comment, to maintain consistency with other appointments made by the town manager ratified for the selectmen, that it seems logical to put
So
town
the-
treasurer and town collector in that category.
So this is where we would strike these from this section and move to the other.
Right.
Because you would have already had, this is the recommend to the selectmen to appoint, as opposed to the other section where the town manager appoints subject to ratification.
Okay, another reference to the planning director. Paragraph C, to me it should be ratify instead of affirm. Section E, the current wording is the term of the person on the board is involved in performance evaluations and collective bargaining agreements, and that would be the town manager. And just maybe a little clarification and wording for that section.
And actually, we had talked to, I know with the library board of trustees, one of the concerns they had was that they appoint the director, but if an employee of the library had a concern about the director, who would they go to? Because the board of trustees doesn't have any control over the staff, and that would be through you. So, and I don't know if there's a way to highlight that part of the personnel role as well, or consider it. So, that's just a question.
We put his or her control under section I, but we didn't there.
We changed it to
Okay,
there.
No.
J, to delete next, to me it sounded repetitive, but that's just an aside. To include in bargaining units under L for when the discussion about negotiation of contracts.
Because technically the contract is with the bargaining unit, not with the town employees. The bargaining units cover the town employees. Yeah.
Yeah, and this paragraph also covers employment contracts. Section M about procurement, I would delete reference to chapter 30B and just say the general laws, because there's multiple sections, multiple statutes for procurement.
So a simple there is just to strike out 30B and chapter 30B and just say general laws?
Yes.
Easy fix.
And it also leaves it open to if there's ever a change in the
How about the
statute.
preceding ones on section 103 of chapter 41?
General laws. You mean mass general laws, is that a given?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all those, anything that specifically cites a specific law should be struck and just put in mass general law? Is that your recommendation?
Yes, or to put any amendment to that provision of law. I think that's, I mean, in legal terms, that can be cleaned up a little bit, but that covers if the legislature changes that section of law, makes amendments, or it's deleted, I think it covers it, but you could just strike the whole reference and say the general laws. This, so we are on Director of Finance and Financial Services, paragraph C. This seems to contradict the first sentence in section 4-2.
Did we,
Uh,
section 5.2 merit principle?
And then 5.3, Director of Finance, Department of Finance, Section A.
I'm sorry, yeah, it's fixing that, 5.2, 5-2. It's just to clarify a little more and references the appropriate article within the charter. So going back to when we talked about the chief financial officer, under section 4-2, in the powers and duties of the town manager, first sentence is, town manager shall be the chief financial officer. And then, under the director of finance and financial services, that person is the chief financial officer.
I think that's a holdover from CAFO. When we converted from CAFO to town manager, at the time, the town manager was the CFO. Since then, we've expanded on the responsibilities of the finance director as CFO. So I think it's appropriate to update the charter to reflect that. So 4-2, the first paragraph in 4-2 is incorrect. Right? But you're still the chief administrative officer.
Yes. Well, you may actually be both.
She's also the chief financial officer.
Yeah, you may be both, because basically, if you're appointing someone to function as the chief financial officer, to perform those duties, they still come back to you.
Correct. So it could be, if so appointed by the town manager under the director of finance, that they're serving in that capacity, but there's another section which everything comes back. Whoever I appoint with, or the town manager appoints to a position, it comes back to the town manager being responsible.
So you can delegate responsibility but not accountability.
Right.
So the question for me would be, when a form comes in, the chief financial officer has to sign, we want to be clear who that person's going to be. And could it be the town manager that is the chief financial officer?
Yes.
Unless they somebody else. Okay. So that would be the theory.
So anyway, so let's go back to the one that you were questioning. Which one was it? 5-2?
4-2 seems to contradict the section on the director of finance and financial services, the first sentence.
The first sentence of 4-2?
No, the first sentence
It's
is
with
5-something.
5-2, paragraph C.
There is no 5-2, paragraph 3. There's a 5-3.
That's fine.
Oh, sorry, 5-3, C.
You shall also serve as the CFO. So one or the other is correct, not both.
Which one's correct? You get to pick.
I think you could put a clause there unless the town manager delegates this authority to or appoints another person in this position.
But
In
to go
both
back to it.
references.
In 4-2?
In both, I would say. Cross-reference.
Could we just, in 5-3, just say that it should be a Department of Finance, Financial Services headed by a Director of Municipal Finance, appointed by the town manager?
And that's going to be redundant with something else.
Is it?
The question is, who is the CFO? Is it the Director of Finance or is it the town manager?
So 4.2 is the town manager.
And according to 5-3C, it's the Director of Financial Services.
So,
which doesn't make any
I think it
sense to
should be
me.
defined, or else you're just going to create a catch-22, and you're going to bounce back and forth between the two.
I personally think if the town manager should appoint a chief financial officer, let's just go right to it.
So in 4-2, the town manager
Appoints.
appoints the chief financial officer. And in the absence of an appointment,
They are,
they are it.
That would be the way to do it.
It works.
Section 3, Division of Accounting, another reference to appointments and to keep consistency with department heads appointed by the town manager, ratified by the selectmen.
Okay, can I just go back? If the director of finance is responsible for the management of the fiscal and financial affairs of the town and for the supervision and coordination of all activities, then what role do they have in the supervision of the treasurer and collector? If any.
Say that again, please.
So who supervises the treasurer and collector then? Does the director of
The director of
finance?
finance.
Okay, okay.
So on the division of accounting, I think we need to have a discussion on that. I respect the comment about whether the town accountant should be appointed by the town manager like other department heads, or is this different? Some cities have the city auditor's position, which is independent of the,
Is this a checks and balances?
yeah, checks and
Yes.
balances. I mean, I think we're fine with having this be a separate thing, because depending on what town you're in, the chief financial officer is either the treasurer or is the town accountant or is somebody different. So there's different models across the state. So the fact is, you could have the town accountant, as we have now, appointed by the selectmen and also serving as the chief financial officer, because we have that as the finance director. I could go either way on this. Does anyone have any initial opinions on this? Are they okay with the town manager appointing this position as well?
Well, that's,
Subject to the ratification of the selectmen. This would be not completatory.
well, that's what I was wondering, and maybe we just take a closer look at it. As they're saying checks and balances, it seems random that it's inconsistent, but maybe it's specific. And it's hard, without going back and looking at it, it's hard to know maybe it was specifically done that way.
It was consistent with the treasurer, the collector, and the accountant were appointed by the selectmen. The treasurer and collector were upon the recommendation of the town manager. This one, the town manager doesn't recommend the town accountant, I don't believe.
Let me probe a little bit further the role of the town accountant. Let me think about this. The town accountant is not the only one looking at, our financial transactions. We also, I assume, have some form of outside
Auditor.
auditing.
So that's after the fact.
Right.
The accountant is during the year.
But the checks are not signed by the accountant.
Right. So to me, it feels more like it's just another ministerial position. Giving it appointment by the selectmen, I'm not clear how that creates a greater level of accountability.
Maybe it provides what prevents conflict.
It's a checks and balances. So,
Well, again, yes, I see where the intent is to have a check and balance. I'm just not sure how it does that.
if both positions report to the same place, there is no checks and balances.
The treasurer, the one who handles the cash, and the one who does the books, reporting to the same person, you technically don't have a checks and balances. And I'll go back to when I was treasurer and chief financial officer, before we had a separate town accountant. I was both. Although we had separate people in my office doing it, we had a town auditor who was elected and oversaw it. So that was the check and balance. What they then did is took the accountant position away from the treasurer-collector, made it separate, eliminated the town auditor position, had it appointed by the selectmen. Now, where it comes down to the failure to supervise, the selectmen don't effectively supervise the town accountant.
Right.
To the point when we were trying to do our annual review of her, what does she do? Well, we know what she does. How does she do it? Talk to the town manager, see how she does.
I guess that's what I'm saying. It feels to me like the role is like any other ministerial role within the town government. It's not.
So it's ultimately, town manager says, cut this check.
And ultimately, it's the town manager who's going to be responsible for all of this anyway.
But the question becomes...
So the person to hold accountable is the town manager. I'm just...
Yeah,
I would like to
this
have the
is-
argument.
this, you know, and I'm thinking, let's do the worst case, we have an embezzlement situation. You know, who's going to catch it? Who has the authority to catch the different things?
I don't know. What if it's the town accountant?
Practically speaking, the selectmen don't have enough day-to-day involvement with the town accountant to provide checks and balances, other than if the accountant brought something forward or didn't bring something forward for fear of getting fired, you would have that check and balance to say, well, he or she doesn't report to the town manager, so the town manager can't fire them. But in terms of their actual day-to-day work, practically speaking, they're probably working day-to-day with the other side of the house, not with us.
Right. Heather, you had a comment?
Just another check and balance is selectmen sign every warrant. I mean, that's, all the bills processed that are getting paid.
Right, and the treasurer can't sign a check unless it's met all of the
Right.
criteria of all of the laws regarding, I mean, that's by statute.
Right.
So,
Straw position right now, switch it to the town manager appoints with the selectmen's review? We won't,
I think that-
this is not an official, this is just a...
What do you suggest, Adam?
I mean, right now, the town manager appoints the finance director, who is both positions.
Today, they reside in
But
one person.
I'm looking at it through the lens of creating consistency, centralization, which is easier for management perspective.
right, and the fact that there's an external audit every year, I think is really a big check, because they look for fraud, so.
This is sort of the next natural step from when we moved to the initial CAFO and then town manager. There are many towns that have the town manager is a truly strong town manager and would be appointing all these people without review by the Board of Selectmen. This still has the review by the Board of Selectmen, which means that every year this position has, or whatever term the positions are, would have to be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen. And there are provisions for removal and other things like that. Okay, so straw, the process right now would we would adopt the town manager's recommendation subject to further review. We're not actually taking a vote now. And certainly people can do their own research on this with other communities.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be appropriate to add in the charter that there'd be an annual, I mean, it's probably someplace else procedurally that there's an annual audit of the financial operations.
Mass General
Reported
law.
back to the, yeah. Well, half of what's in here is Mass General law, anyway. I mean, you know, basically when you go through that's...
We can see what sort of language, because currently there's requirements that we have to have an annual audit, but in the event there wasn't a requirement, we'd still want to have an annual audit.
Right.
Okay?
Next section was division of procurement. So this is under the responsibilities of the town manager, the chief procurement officer. So that was also under section 4-2-10. So I guess if you
So
hired staff,
Good.
but
I was going to say, this is another paragraph that includes specific references to sections and chapters of the
Yeah.
general laws.
correct.
So would we pull all that out and simply say general laws?
So another comment on this section is that it's under the auspices of the finance director and accountant. And Karen was actually brought this up, that shouldn't be under the guise of the town
It
account.
should be under section
Oh, it
4,
should
It should
not
be
5.
involved in the
Right.
procurement.
Right. It shouldn't be in 5, it should be in 4.
It should be enforced. Town manager is a procurement officer.
Right.
And that's a statutory part of the town manager is the procurement officer.
No, you need one.
No, you need
one,
one,
right.
it's statutory. you need
And so
one.
we're setting that the town manager, our town manager is the procurement officer. That's why we would take out this division from the finance department and just take the duties of procurement and put it with the town manager.
Although the duties of procurement, I mean, you don't do all of the duties of procurement.
She and Elaine do it.
Procurement officer.
So basically, when people order stuff, it all goes through you?
Like,
Purchase
office
orders.
supplies?
Yeah.
No, it's under a certain threshold. If it needs to go out to bid.
If it goes out to bid,
everything-
yes, all that goes through you, but procurement is also
Yeah, this says,
purchasing.
says responsible for purchasing all supplies, materials, and equipment
To the
to the
extent.
extent section 103, which is the procurement law, is what you're saying. I mean, at some point, we may have a town purchasing agent.
I guess what I'm just saying is that some of those things aren't initiated through your office, and I'm not sure where they are initiated. If they're initiated through the departments, they don't send that to Karen. They send all purchase orders to you?
I approve all purchase orders.
Okay,
Yeah, for me,
so then that's fine.
yeah.
And it's natural that once a position has authority and responsibility, that they can delegate the responsibility and maintain the authority.
But the theory was, is that duty within the division, the finance division? And we're saying it's not. Department of Finance.
No, I think it goes to town manager.
Yeah.
And even the little stuff is off the state list and all the other things that are under the authority of the procurement officer. Right.
Okay.
Comment was under section 6-3, mission of budget message. My suggestion is that the publication be on the town website.
Yeah, I never, that makes sense.
In other times when we've talked about adding things to the website, we've talked about maybe having it be both.
Do they have it?
When we've talked about like advertising, like a town meeting, would we add that officially to the town website, but also leave it as newspaper? And I was just wondering, rather than one or the other, if it could be put in both. I mean, not everybody's gone all the way to social media, so I don't know if somebody might be interested in it and still have the newspaper, so as like both being locations.
Well, I think the question goes to, I'm not sure that the last time the budget was in the paper.
It was in the warrant, and was the warrant in the paper? I know in past years, the warrant has been published
I
in the
believe
paper.
so.
Maybe not in the last year.
I don't believe so.
In past years, it has been.
Yeah, I don't know how.
So this is a summary of the proposed budget.
Without wishing ill on the print media, I mean, it's
No,
circulation is,
I know people who aren't on
Getting
websites,
smaller.
and I hate to abandon
that's the
a
issue.
source that some
Right.
people are still using. It seems unfair.
The only thing that is different is that the budget does go to every household by
In the
mail.
warrant, right. Yeah.
So,
Then if we added that, as long as there was a print version officially.
yeah. Well, we would want to say, and included in the,
The warrant circulated to every household.
yeah.
Didn't we have something on the warrant?
That's in a separate section.
We can refer to that section in the warrants.
Yeah, just wanted to show we're being consistent.
Speaking of the town website, I was expecting that October 15th. The new one?
The new one, no, early spring. Yeah, that we're doing.
I mean, October 15th, it passed. So now we're looking early spring?
Okay, so we'll find the language where it says warrant. Okay? .5 budget.
comment to strike that one.
All right, but there is no abacus.
Right.
You don't want to say that you're going to use marketing.
Yeah, that feels like that was, at the time it was written, that was aspirational, which is now reality.
Right.
I seem to remember a few years ago, there were people who didn't believe in computers. And so I think that was there to make sure.
There was also a change of the previous operations that may have been pulled from another town's charter as well.
This next suggestion under A, actually suggestion by the finance director, that more clearly identifies the definition of those expenditures for current operations, the terminology, departmental appropriation.
So you're striking town agency. If we go back to the definition, what is the definition of town agency again? If you say
Multiple member body, any department, division, or office of the town of Bloomington.
I think we need to keep town agencies so that we make sure we pick up things like the sewer commission, which is technically not a department, it's a commission, and the housing authority, other things like that. So department is included within it, if that's okay, they understand it.
Skip to C then.
Okay.
This is another recommendation by the finance director. Identifying all other available sources of funding.
So it basically is anything which includes surplus revenue, free cash, estimated balances, so it automatically includes all of that. And it actually includes other things as well, it's not clear. Go ahead. That's it. So the schedule for budget and everything else like that's okay?
Yeah, my review, I didn't have any issues or comments on that.
One of the questions that came up, and I don't know if anyone found the answer, regarding when the school committee has to submit its budget, what the date is on that?
End of December?
Yeah, so
December 3rd.
really early, yeah.
Well, that was my recollection, but I went looking and could not find a specific reference that said the end of the calendar year. The only thing I could find was insufficient time to allow the town manager to submit her budget, which is due mid-February.
Well, then it could just be by practice if that's how
I think
it
it's by practice.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, because then you have to get stuff in advance.
Because the budget hearings are always in January for the school committee.
Right.
Okay, we'll come back then. Other questions that you have of us, Heather?
No.
We're going to turn around and ask if anyone has any questions of the town manager. So she's not been privy to our conversations, other than unless she happens to have read our minutes, but we've not officially communicated with her what our thinking on various sections, so she'll have an opportunity to review some of those things. Go ahead.
I would like to bring up, if you remember, Tim Murphy wrote in asking that the language regarding the removal of the town manager needs attention. Where and how is a request for a hearing filed? I suggest it be filed with the town clerk, who shall immediately notify the moderator, who then calls a meeting. The charter is then silent on the procedures of the meeting. The charter provides the manager may file a written response, but does not provide for an actual hearing with the right to counsel and call a witness. So, that's a biggie. So, I don't know.
Were you CC'd on this one?
No.
No, okay, so
Okay.
we'll get you a copy of that. And
And just a general,
It was distributed. That was
just a
a,
general comment, you would want to
Yeah,
make your
Tim-
employment contract consistent with the language.
right.
Also, can we make that maybe at some point?
It was passed out.
It
our
must be
first or
passed out at a
second
meeting.
reading.
Must be
Yeah,
passed out.
Tim is concerned that your rights
we're
are not
completely
being
protected.
protected.
Good.
You want to read it? Or
Like, I'll
if you want to read it.
I'll send it to both of you.
Oh, great,
It's
thank
off
you.
copy. Okay. Anyone else?
That's good. I mean, and then that will be something that Heather, we'll want to make sure it's consistent with your, we want to make sure it's consistent with your contract, and we want to make sure town council reviews. This would clearly be the same way we want to have for removal of other positions as well.
Right.
This is something you want to, not, regular town council could probably answer, but you probably want to use employment council to review that section.
Who forwarded that? Oh, sorry, let me just catch that.
Tim Murphy. Probably
Town moderator. Town moderator.
I call it number 3, but that one is also,
Do you have a number address or just your personal one?
He's doing it personally.
I do. And Jeff, I think.
So the personal one. Okay.
It's Olive Ford, so I don't log in.
No
It just
worries.
sends it straight to me.
You have some time, I'll give you advice on why you want to start using the Lunenburg one.
Yeah, I've heard.
It's true.
No, it's in-depth, the one that I use is my across-the-board professional email, it's not my personal.
Yeah, so, but I have them all combining too, but I have business stuff sent to that one for a number of reasons.
So, any other questions of the town manager?
Yeah, I have 2 actually, and they're topics, not really questions. One is, we've been kicking around a discussion around a position or a responsibility, not a position, of facilities manager, which would cross various elected, multiple member bodies, elected, appointed, school, town, etc. And there's a lot of nuances to that discussion, and I'm not suggesting do we add a person, I'm just saying, do you have any input for us on going forward, whether the charter should make any statement around that?
Can I tag on that real quick?
Sure.
And also, I think that one of the highlights is that some communities do have a designated facilities manager. And right now in our town it's rolled into other duties, and I think most of it falls under DPW. And I think the point that I was making initially was, when DPW directors are looking at their full range of responsibilities, that where this falls in their priority list may not match up as if you had a person designated to solely look at the sustainability of all of the town buildings and how they would evaluate things and rate things. So, I mean, how do you, I'm going to tag on to his question and say, how do you think that, is this a role that we should consider exploring within the town, creating this facilities management type role that has broad oversight over all town buildings, or should we continue to have this as a responsibility within different departments?
I think there's value to the discussion. I mean, obviously, town facilities is one of our main topics lately for discussion, and making sure all our assets are being maintained. And over the years, I think Lunenburg has been very conservative with adding headcount. I worked in a much smaller community, and we had about equivalent staff, if you take into consideration the police and fire departments. So there's been a lot of responsibility added to certain positions. I don't know if it was by means of not wanting to add headcount and just adding on these duties to people, but it's a lot of responsibility for one person to do and make accomplishments in all those areas.
So the charter for the town manager states to have full jurisdiction over the rental and use of all town facilities and property except for property under the control of the school committee, the library trustees, and the Conservation Commission, and shall be responsible for the maintenance and repair of all town buildings and facilities placed under his control of this charter by law, vote, or the town or otherwise. We've already moved the library to your responsibility / as you've delegated to DPW. So right now, the DPW facility role is done by the town manager's fiat. So, and the schools are still the schools, so they have their facility. So it's already your duty. I think the town has not voted the head count, as opposed to consciously not having a separate facility. So I don't think we consciously have ever had a discussion not to have an extra, other than the fact that that would mean another position. But we're rapidly, as we've seen with the lack of maintenance, or lack of, when some of that is the lack of maintenance is due to lack of appropriation as opposed to personnel supervision. So anyways, would you, if your druthers, would you have that separate from the DPW department? Would it be a, I mean, if we set a director of facility management as appointed by the town manager, you could appoint the town DPW director to still do it, but do you think it should be called out as a separate department head?
Or it could be a department head under the DPW director, just like there's a cemetery superintendent. Your business manager for your sewer mission could be under that whole umbrella. But I think it's a position, I mean, it's a full-time job just to do, overseeing all those buildings, having a maintenance plan, doing the procurement for all the different things that need to get done, the repairs and reconstruction, alterations. So there's quite a few tasks associated with that.
It's what I do for a living, and I certainly think that looking at the buildings in town, that the school department should stay by itself and having their own director of facilities, because they have unique challenges with the schools. And my own thought is, certainly the town has suffered by not having a designated person who solely looks at facility management. And when I've done a brief comparison to, and we look at AIR as an example, which does have this role, and their buildings generally are in much better condition. And also the facility management process, I think has profound impact on communities' budget line items, because it takes you out of this responsive mode and puts you in a more preventative mode. Instead of, oh crap, things are falling apart, we have mold in the basement, it's, hey, this is going to be a problem, we have moisture coming into this. So when you have that designated person who can catch these things and then, and make that repair, that on the front end costs way less than when you're coming into it after, failure. Because it seems like the plan so far is a lot of it is planned to fail and then fix. And that's not a good approach.
And I'm not arguing against your point. I think your point is very, very well taken. But I think that the crux of it is the schools have had a very talented facilities manager and had no funding to do what needed to be done until recently when we were able to do the new school, and that relieved a lot of pressure and everything else. And frankly, closing a building in the process allowed us to focus on buildings that we were capable of maintaining.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I could comment on this, just to be consistent, when we've talked about this before, I think a lot of the things our buildings need are often things that are outsourced or could be outsourced in terms of the project that needs to be done, and it is a funding of the actual project that we may be missing rather than the person. I think you already mentioned it, that we are really conservative on having employees, and I know there's other departments that have been waiting or asking for a long time to, like a part-time fire department, EMT versus paramedics, and all these different employee needs in town. And this I see very much as, is there the funding available for the buildings? And there may already be the people who could implement or outsource the projects if we gave them the funds to do so. So I see it as a funding facilities situation more so than adding personnel to do so. And you actually lose funds by adding a person.
And you actually could designate an existing person to oversee the contracts as opposed to actually do the maintenance. I mean, that's part of what you want to have. You want to have some plans and other stuff like that. Right now, this all falls to the town manager.
Yeah.
And over the years, the town manager may or may not have been focused on other things. The other thing I would say is there's been various buildings that we didn't fix because we thought we were going to dispose of them. And therefore, since that might happen in the next 2 or 3 years, maintenance wasn't done during those 2 or 3 years. You know, so some of the reason we got into that is that part, and then the other time, town hall has been an example. There's been many opportunities where the town talked about renovating and they chose not to, and then went to the next planning stage. But I think we need to focus on not necessarily whether it's a position or not, but where should the duty be? And do we need to call out the position because we think it's important that this duty be done, or do you strengthen the duties and responsibility of the town manager? Which will then, through the budgetary process, determine how it's be done. Because we don't want to say in this charter, you need to have 3 lifeguards at the park beach, because that's too far down into the process. So you bring it up a little bit later. Do you want to have a director of parks and recreation? We don't want to put that in here necessarily, because that's starting to tie the hands of government, because this is a constitution, not necessarily an operating plan.
Yeah.
So I just want to...
Mr. Chairman, I agree totally that this is not about a position or about head count. But having been in facilities for my career as well, I disagree that it be a subset of the DPW or separate school and town. I believe it's a responsibility and accountability that is up with the town manager, because it is, when you look collectively at all of our properties, conservation, school, town, it's an incredible asset that needs to be planned for and managed as part of the capital plan. And in fact, in looking at some of the MSBA stuff, there are clauses that we've signed off on with the new school that actually commit to a certain amount of maintenance going forward as a percentage of some number, etc., that I'm not sure we've climbed into to say what does that really mean, but it's probably good management and it should have been done on the primary school, which is now in a terrible shape. But the point, and I'm not criticizing the school, I'm not criticizing the people in the current role, but I'm just saying if you roll up all the properties we have, current, past, and future, it's an incredible asset that I think the charter needs to address responsibility up there with. And the reason I bring it up in the town manager discussion is because it does cross lines between what's now school and town, etc. And the town manager is the one place where, at least at budget time, we cross those things. So I think it's a big issue. I think the funding and the emphasis will drive the operational decisions on who does the day-to-day stuff, whether it's outsourced, whether it's done by our people, whether we have the right skill set, whether it's a subset of any other department, or whether it's a different function. That's an operational decision. But I think it's a critical charter decision for the town.
I agree.
Well, do you think it should just be, rather than stated as a set of responsibilities and duties, that, okay, so we have a section 6.7 on capital improvements program. Should we have a section 6.8 on asset maintenance, and just basically state the importance of it and assign?
I think we should.
That may be a way to do it. I
think we probably have to work this out. But I'm
Right.
I make a living off of people not planning for buildings. And so that's what I come in and say, you've spent so much money on contractors, and if you just hire us, or you bring someone onto your staff, then this is how you're going to save money in the long run. And I have yet to find a model, that it doesn't work. That you're always going to save money when you have a person designated to look at things who is also skilled in making some of those repairs. if you think from the smallest level, to the biggest, it's also training opportunities too. And usually the skill sets of the person that's in this role is usually someone who is either a general contractor or some form of contractor within the state, and that way, you can oversee and manage a lot of these projects. And the real benefit for the town is you're essentially bringing a contractor on staff to kind of look at these things, manage these things, and of course, specifically, that limits who's going to do this, usually people at the beginning or end of their careers, yada, yada, yada. But I certainly think that the charter needs to address the fact that this is an aging town with aging buildings, and we can't be in this permanent responsive mode of things going wrong.
And I would...
You have a lot of duties.
I would expand on that to move it beyond buildings, that this is every physical thing that we own.
Yes.
So it's really asset management. But then we need to have that further discussion when we come up with it. We have conservation land. Conservation Commission is currently logging one of the properties. I would not expect the facilities manager, or whatever we call asset manager, to be responsible for doing that, but maybe there's some oversight, because how is that affecting the road that comes near it or something else like that? There needs to be communication. Cemeteries, maintaining the cemeteries, the daily operation is under the town manager, delegated to the DPW department, because that's the cemetery gets merged into that. Parks, the ball fields, various things like that. When we talk about other land that's under the selectman's jurisdiction, that's not assigned to anybody, who's taking care of that property? Nobody.
I think the infrastructure, roads and bridges, et cetera, not the maintenance of them, but the planning and capital planning.
So then the question becomes the school. Should the school be under that duty? The whole concept of dual supervision is difficult. We do have a director of IT. Loxie talked about her IT manager, which is also our IT manager, which is because it's the town's IT manager. So what I'm going to do is say this is a good topic for us to do more research on and come back to it. I'm a big believer in that we need to centralize more. We need to talk to the school committee to find out whether they're willing to have some of that process, because we could go the other way and say the school's manager is going to be doing it, but then it's always the school. Is the school who wins if there's a fight between the two? Well, there'll always be a fight between buildings or properties. So it's the building that needs it at the time. And will the town appropriate the money that's needed to maintain its assets? Major equipment is another part. Who's managing the equipment? Is it the department? Fire department maintains its fire vehicles. So are we talking fixed assets as opposed to movable assets?
So, two reactions. First, to be devil's advocate, do we have the IT director position in the charter?
No.
Could we operate effectively as a town without one in this day and age?
No.
So that's the first observation I would make when you're talking about whether it be buildings or all assets. We've got an IT infrastructure, as you pointed out, both schools and town, and it's a very important position. It's not in the charter. So is this something we really need to put in the charter? And do we want to be so bold as to say it's all the assets of the town? You make the position so big that it can't possibly succeed, and it's going to fail the charter if people don't buy into it.
And to answer that, we could still say the town manager is responsible for asset management and define it as all buildings and properties of the town, perhaps without the exclusion of the school. We're going to come back on that. But you don't say how you're going to do it. You just say you have to do it. It's your duty to do it.
And that delegating and things would be implied.
I would.
And just to feed off of what you had just said, so it doesn't matter that the IT director is or is not in the charter. We have an IT director and it's functioning.
Okay. So we could create a position responsible for buildings.
Correct.
Which we've done within the school department.
I think that
And is it or is it not functional?
I'm just feeding off what you're
Why
saying.
not? And I think it comes back to Katie's point. It's going to boil down to funding at the end of the day. And if you fund a position, that's however many thousands of dollars you're not spending on maintenance, you're spending it on managing the process instead.
Which is a...
Well, I would hope that it would be a value-added process. Somebody with the knowledge and ability to get things done ultimately should be a value-added process. I have to say that Mr. Londa is a value-added process at the schools.
I'm not arguing against that. I'm arguing what goes in the charter.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
What do we need to do as a town to operate effectively? And what does the charter need to say?
Point of order or something like that. A decade or so ago, I believe Mr. Londa was the facilities manager for the town.
Correct.
And directed both the town and the school properties. I'm not sure if everyone here was aware of that. So I just wanted to point out, I mean, we're discussing different things, but at one point there was one person.
Yeah, and I would think that, and my own experiences, I hear what you're saying, but I want to kind of respond to the IT role. I think in the day and age that we're in, it's just one of those requirements that we must have someone like that that's doing your work. Now, when it comes to maintenance needs, property needs, those are things that you don't need day to day. That's more long-range thinking. That's not, I need to get to communicate tomorrow or today or right now. And I think what happens sometimes is it gets on people's back burners more often. I'll get to it. And then it becomes a problem. My own assessment I would not be capable, and I think I'm a very capable person, I would not be capable of managing the schools and the town buildings. I think that once if the role becomes too similar to the town manager's role, then it's not really something that they're doing, it's something that they're delegating. And my own experience would suggest that it should be a role really for the town, really for town assets, fixed assets, that can be integrated into multiple departments, and really it's building focused and property focused. And if you guys would like, at our next meeting, I can, one of the things I actually was doing this week, it was giving a presentation on the project management process and how vital it is to have this type of role within organizations. And I can present, if you'd like, next week, a brief little chart I drew up of how this looks and the critical nature of when you're looking at a project and all the different processes. Normally what happens is you plan it well, you have the initiation phase of this all well, and the execution goes to a contractor, but you really need that bridge of this person that's there to both project manage and oversee facilities to kind of make sure everything ends up the way you want it to end up. Because too often I think you get an end result that does not match your intention because you're missing this middle piece.
But I'm not sure that that's the question as much as, well, for me anyway, is whether it should be in the charter.
Yeah.
And what I'd say is that, and I'm going to have Heather talk, is that how we do it should be the town manager. What we want done should be the town charter. So we give direction, and I think that's why we need to look at some of the other things that we actually have in the charter. Do we really need to name those positions? We name the major department heads because you have to have a treasurer, you have to have a collector, because those are functions you have to have by statute. So that's why a lot of the department heads are in there. I would say that the animal control officer should be appointed by the town manager as opposed to the board of selectmen to be consistent. But that's not something that has to be in the charter. That may be something we need to do. We may want to look at some other things on that part. So the other thing I'd say is like a facilities doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be a contract to hire somebody to be the day-to-day person, but it's not a town employee. Same thing with IT. There's many places that you don't have a person who does the day-to-day. You hire a firm that comes in as your IT facility. So we as the Charter Commission should not be determining that. The town manager should be determining. Turning it over to you.
Just a couple comments. I think there's many ways that we looked at how we can share resources, particularly with the school, to create efficiencies. This may not be one of them, having overseen both school and town facilities. Secondly, I always look to other communities and their best practices. to see, what are they doing for their facilities? So it's something I would like to research myself, and their organizational structure and how that position operates. Also in the charter, it talks about under section 5.1, organization of town agencies. The town manager from time to time, after consultation with the Board of Selectmen, will prepare and submit to town meeting plans of organization or reorganization. I think there's a provision for that, and I think you have to specifically call out the position within the charter. And in the absence of a method of appointment, I believe there's another section that the town manager makes those appointments. So I think there's things to consider.
Clearly, the discussion shows the importance of the topic, and that we need to address the topic. How we do it will be something that we go along. So,
And I think if we've reached a consensus as a group that is that everybody's in agreement that there's a need for that to happen somehow. It's how we go about doing that.
Okay. So that was your second one?
That was my first one.
Good try.
My second one, and we have talked about this several times, is just the whole relationship between employees who are employees that ultimately report to the town manager through whatever organization, but provide some level of service to a multiple member body, elected or appointed. And there's several examples, but I think we've heard enough disconnects in various things to try to get some input on that and to try to work it if it's appropriate to work it.
I'd like to hear your input on that myself.
So one of the things that the charter did when we first did the town charter was specifically parks, cemetery, actually just about every department except for the school, the employees below the department head, and then some of the department head goes to the town manager, the employees are responsible to the town manager. So the theory being is that trying to consolidate instead of having different fiefdoms of different committees of how things actually operated, that was part of the theory of trying to do it, not to make a super powerful town manager, but to try to have some consistency of personnel supervision. That went along with the fact that when the charter process first started, we basically only had the police union. Well, now we have fire union, we have a clerical union, we have an additional union beyond? DPW. So now you have contract negotiations, which we've given to the town manager to negotiate. So the fact is, implementation of those contracts should follow through with the town manager as well, similar to what went on with the library trustees. Personnel issues on that follow through the town manager. If there's something relating to the director, the library trustees still are responsible for that part, but for the other part, so I think part of the clarifications that we need to have is cemetery, parks, and sewer, the day-to-day operation is under the town manager. I'm recommending that we have a little bit more language that make it more clear that it is the town manager's responsibility, including supervision of employees. I think that those are the three departments that the transition was not as clean. The theory being the day-to-day operation. Well, the fact was is that the day-to-day operation didn't get completely transferred. It was sort of some of the committees kept them.
But I think also just to go back to the library issue, and maybe it's that if they're under an employment contract of some sort, chances are good there's a grievance procedure that's in the contract. And so maybe that really addresses their question, and I don't know, I guess the question became, if I have a grievance, where do I go, and what is the role of the Library Board of Trustees if there's a grievance against the...
So that part, I think there's a pretty defined process. It's more the process of supervision of those employees by the departments that are not under the jurisdiction of so like the elected sewer, the elected planning board. There's sort of the question of who supervises the land use director. who supervises the business manager at the sewer commission, who supervises the parks.
Who is the appointing authority?
The land use director is appointed by the town manager with consultation of the planning board.
So that's who the supervisor is.
The planning director, actually.
The planning
According
board.
to charter.
Planning board. So, right, not the, so if there was a personnel issue, does the town manager have to go back to the planning board for the supervision? It's not clear.
Yeah, and it definitely needs to be clarified, and I think the planning board's under the belief that it should be the town manager.
So you have an entrance of the employee, there's nothing saying for the exit, or during the time where you don't have an exit, you have supervision of. The sewer business manager is appointed by the town manager with input from the sewer commission. But it doesn't say about how the supervision is and who's the day-to-day reporting.
Okay.
So that's where we need to be a little bit more
Okay.
clear. And we may be going to town council for some suggested language on that.
And I have a couple charters from other communities I can share with the group.
Great.
I'd also like to see, and this just to call it unrelated probably to the charter, but I'd like to see that the members of the boards with employees are part of the employee review process, that there's an opportunity for them to provide feedback either at the beginning of the year when goals are set or throughout the process.
They call it matrixed organization. Feedback, ideally 360, but at least if you get...
I've heard the 360.
So that's two.
That's it?
Okay. Didn't know if there was another one.
No, they were the two big ones, and
Yeah.
they're bigger issues, but while we had the town manager, I wanted her input on it.
I had one, well, we had the town manager. One of the things that we had tossed around, and had been tossed around by a previous charter review, is the role of town clerk. Is it ministerial or is it policy making, and therefore should it be appointed or should it be elected? I'm boiling down a long discussion into a very short period of time to save people time. Do you have any thoughts?
And this is, any comment is no reflection on the current.
Nothing to do with the current,
It's just a general comment about elected positions that hold so much responsibility and have a expertise and knowledge that the position has come to. Like, that town clerk position has evolved over the years into so much more that requires specific expertise and has a lot of authority, which if it were someone newly elected who had absolutely no experience in municipal government and how that office works, I think that would be an extreme detriment to the town. So that's my comment on that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a comment. I think you're doing a great job, Heather, with the town as our town manager. And my question is, on the Board of Selectmen, we've talked about the name of the Board of Selectmen. I voiced that I find the name Selectmen to be not supportive enough to our young women in the community. I think it kind of tells them that if you want to be a leader in your community, you're going to be a man one day. Because that's essentially what Selectmen means. And I understand in the more historical context, man, of course, applies to both males and females, but I think that the era that we're in now, that, these words matter a little bit more. Mr. Eversole mentioned that the Board of Selectmen brought this up before, talked about this, that there wasn't an overwhelming push from the Board of Selectmen to get a name change. What are your thoughts on the name of the Board of Selectmen?
I don't really have a preference. Either terminology, select board or selectmen, I think is, it doesn't offend me to say board of selectmen. I don't know if as a member of the board, being a woman, I can't say in opposition, but I don't have a preference either way.
I don't suppose we could say in the charter that like it's select board and board of selectmen are used interchangeably.
Yeah, we want to make decisions.
Okay.
Yes. You can can do what you want. Well, I mean, that's sort of, there's an element there, that each year the board could choose to do it, but I'd still be interested to find out what the other towns across the state have to do with that, so.
Yeah, it'll be in the survey, so.
Surveys, yeah.
Other comments? Okay,
No, I was ready for her to, get ready for tomorrow night.
that's right. Good. Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. This won't be the last time we will be talking with you. so.
Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting me.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
And the last thing, let's just go over
I
schedule.
want to catch you in the hallway.
So February 21st, I am unable to make. I know we talked about trying to catch up for the different meetings we've missed.
I am unable to.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we not meet on the 21st and that we try to make the 7th, not that we haven't been doing work, but we will try to have votes on the non-controversial items and try to start staking out some territory on other items. And I will take the responsibility to try to write up the language, as I said before, for some of the changes that would be not controversial and other things like select board that we need to decide what we're going to do on that. And we can take some initial positions without, if we want to, just to see where we're going, with the idea that then that topic might be more ready for prime time to ask a survey, that we try to identify which things are we ready for the people to ask for the feedback from the public.
So we're saying that we would meet on the February 7th and then again on the 28th.
That's correct.
Great.
You just want Valentine's Day.
You mean the 20th?
So we're going to meet the 7th,
Not the 21st.
Yeah.
the 7th and the 28th,
28th.
and not the 21st or the 14th.
But we're meeting the 7th, okay.
Yep.
And we had proposed that for the 7th, in the last meeting, we discussed trying to categorize the topics thus far into, minor changes.
Yep. So I'll take a first pass and get
Okay,
that out,
great.
and then you can react to it.
Great.
Sounds great.
So are they
Excuse me.
controversial or what
Excuse
is
me.
controversial?
You will respond to it, which is more positive than react to it. Like medication. I want you to respond to it, not react to it. Any public comment from the public?
Can I be the public right
Yeah.
now? So the warrant is open and it closes March 22nd. Is the time frame still approaching that you'll have a recommendation for annual town meetings?
Our goal is yes, but it may have to pull, so we're going to have to talk about what we need to put in for a placeholder that would be enough to actually have a document that people would be able to respond to in the warrant. So
Thank you.
thank you for that, Art. Any other comments from the board?
Just a thought on the discussion of the facilities. At some point, it might be worth having Mr. Long and just talk about what his role is and
Okay.
just
It's good to have that as an option.
just an option.
Anything else to come before us tonight?
Sure, I just have a question about facilities that I don't know the answer to in regards to the schools versus the town. Do the schools have different requirements with Corey and their personnel that make it like a separate entity in the way it functions? Or is there...
It's traditionally because when all town buildings are legally under the jurisdiction of the school committee. Technically, the town can't do anything that the school committee doesn't agree to. So that's why it's always been separate. The budget, the town votes the bottom line budget, and after that, it's up to the school committee how to decide to spend their money. That's what traditionally was why the library was different, because the money was actually given to the library, that sort of like, and then the cemetery, a lot of that was, given as a certain way, but it's still a town cemetery. But all town employees have to be quarried.
Okay.
So,
But let me answer that slightly differently, and not to disagree with anything you just said. There are certain requirements of a building if you use it as a school, so that when the town took over the Passios, if we wanted to keep the Flack Collaborative in that building, somebody would have had to come up to speed on what those requirements were, and that's why John agreed to run it, even though it was a town building, because he was familiar with all of them. I'm not familiar with any of them, but there are certain...
So it's how you run the building as opposed to the...
Now, it's not something that somebody else couldn't learn, but it's something that he knew.
Right, yes, which fire codes you have to follow, which,
Right,
yeah,
right.
it's like as specific
Yeah, right.
as that.
The occupancy code is different from
I'm
school.
just get concerned that we can't maybe create one answer to a really complex.
Which is why we don't describe in the charter now who's responsible for the school buildings, because the presumption is the school committee. So...
Actually, we do.
Oh, I'm wrong. Thank you. Well, then-
Without getting at the exact paragraph, town manager to have full
Except for
jurisdiction
schools.
over
Right.
the rental and use of all town facilities and property, except property under the control of the school committee, the library trustees, and conservation.
Yeah.
And shall be responsible for the maintenance and repair of all town buildings and facilities placed under his control by this charter.
So I wonder
So
whether... I
the
guess-
maintenance is already covered.
Yeah.
We could tweak the wording.
Yeah, I think that my personal thing would be, we'll probably tweak that to strengthen that, and then determine procedurally town budget and town manager how to actually do it.
And do we do a fair amount of discussing that sentence and adding land and changing it in terms of...
There was another section that we had that, and then we've, I've asked
I made some notes to that effect.
yeah, and I've asked the town manager to get us a list of all town property and who's currently responsible for it, so we actually communicate with them if we make any changes on those parts.
And that goes, when you said add a section, I think that might be nice to take this really, all this information, and then have a little section about assets so it's very clearly spelled out.
Well, it's also just interesting that the charter refers to capital improvement, but we can't even do capital maintenance.
Right.
So I'm not even sure, I guess basically it's, that whole section
Well-
might just be asset management, because the capital plan that's submitted isn't so much to improve as much as it is to replace.
And in fact, many municipalities have built buildings that were built to a higher level standard, knowing that it was not going to be maintained. So you build it out of brick, because that'll be easier to maintain, and ceramic walls, so that you don't have to maintain it as much, because you know you're not going to.
Got it?
It's not the right way to do it, but a lot of places will do that, as opposed to build a sheetrock wall that you know somebody's going to bang into right away, and you're going to have to maintain it. So
Got it.
we should be doing maintenance and capital improvement.
Yes.
Any other comments? Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 6:30.